As the race for US 2024 elections come close, there are a lot of topics that are gaining momentum, be it abortion, gun control, or immigration. Each of the candidates running for White House have their own understanding and their own policy for each of these topics. But what do US citizens want? How different are the views of Democrats and Republicans? Today, I sat down with Julie, who is a Republican voter, and I discussed each of these points to understand her perspective as a Republican voter. My name is Ankur, and you are listening to the News Park. Hey, Julie, how are you?
I'm good, Anchor. How are you?
I'm good. And first of all, thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show and, express your views and agree to answer my questions. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So, Julie, we know that 2024 elections are coming up and everyone is, gearing up. Different candidates from Democrats and Republican sides are gearing up, and there's a lot of heated debate about various issues across the country. And we wanted to get your opinion on what you think is going to happen, how US has been for the past 4 years, how's the administration doing, and what does kind of future holds for the US. And but before we begin, I just want you to, tell us a little bit about yourself so that our listeners, our viewers can, know about your background so that they can probably get some insights about, how your thought process works. It'll be easier for them to understand your perspective.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me on. In some ways, I feel like the least qualified person to be on discussing politics. I have been a wife and mother for the past, oh gosh, over 4 years. My youngest is about to turn 5 in a couple months, and I have 3 children. And I've been out of the regular corporate workforce since that time. However, as we were kind of talking and thinking about it, I do represent a good percentage of America, and probably a voice that's not heard as much through the media and through podcasts. And so in some ways, I'm kind of honored that, you of course you would care, but that, people may even care to hear what I have to say. And, I'm not a news journalist. I don't have a political background. And so, I'm really having to just sort of filter it through my worldview from, the media, which a lot of us would agree has been maybe more unreliable in the past few years, and, just some personal intuition and experience as just a fellow human being. So
Awesome.
my husband is sane, and he's actually, fun fact, he is from New Zealand, so he is not a U.S. citizen, so he will not be voting in this election. He is working on his citizenship, so he'll have dual citizenship. But anyway, I don't know that that will happen before this election. So I have a bachelor's degree. I was in the corporate world for about 13 years doing predominantly sales of luxury goods. So I do bring some sort of knowledge and understanding in that way. But again, more recently, I just am raising my world leaders and have a little side business. And my husband's we're small business owners and a serial entrepreneur. So that's a little bit about me.
You might be sharing your views with a lot of other people who are probably not, how do I say it, not comfortable coming in front of camera or talk about politics, as you said. But why is that? What do you think is stopping them?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think it's become really difficult to have a respectful conversation about things we may not agree on, especially politics. There's so many big controversial issues right now that have become very polarizing and divisive. And it's unfortunate because I think we need the ability to think differently. I think we add a lot to our society when we do come with different backgrounds, different opinions, and different experiences. But unfortunately, it just feels that when you do open your mouth and try to share, it may not be always returned in a favorable or respectful way, and sometimes even in a very threatening manner.
Right.
So jokingly, when you and I spoke about this podcast, and I wasn't sure how many people actually saw this, but I thought, oh geez, the last thing I want is to be, dropping my little children off at preschool, and to have someone like, cursing at me or mad because I feel differently. And so and I do find in my friend group of other mothers and things, there is a hesitation to speak up, whether you feel like I don't have the experience, or my voice isn't valid, or maybe I don't know everything that's going on in politics. But whenever I've tried to share something, it hasn't been well received, or the media. If you say something that may be different than what the strongest opinion is, you could be called a bigot. So there is a big, real hesitation about speaking up.
When do you think this started? Because I remember that this wasn't the case like a decade back. People used to
Yeah.
feel freely able to discuss what they think, openly on different platforms. But then suddenly something changed. Why do you think this shift happened?
I mean, that's a great question. I'm not exactly sure why it happened. I definitely, I guess just that we're speaking through this, having all the social media outlets that we have, and people using that as such a huge form of communication now, it's much easier to sit behind your phone or your laptop and spout out a very strong and negative or hurtful or hateful opinion, or viewpoint, and without really regard for the person behind the screen, because you're not actually seeing them or communicating with them face to face. So in some reasons, I think people maybe became a lot more bold with that. And then now having these face to face conversations, there's so much division already. I don't know. That's just my guess.
Let's dig into politics a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So you identify as a Republican, correct?
Yes.
So why is that? What are the things that align you as a Republican as opposed to a Democrat?
Yeah. Well, I want to first give a little caveat and just say that I consider myself sort of a free thinker, and it's really hard for me to sort of just put myself in the box or check a box of one thing, because I certainly don't believe and align all with Republican. There are some things that align more Democrat that I might agree with, but I just think historically, some of the economic policies, I think some social things, I think a big one, a very controversial one that we sort of discussed, just the sanctity of life is very important and tender to my life, to my heart, to my conviction, which just historically has fallen in the Republican Party. So
Okay.
I don't, yeah.
Oh, interesting. And you live in Texas, which is a
Yes.
historically red state.
Yes.
But you were born in California,
Yes.
a blue state. Then you moved to
Yeah.
red state. So when you go out of Texas, when you travel, to a Democrat state, do you see some change in behavior if people know that you're from Texas? Do you see a certain shift?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there's a lot of stereotypes for people from Texas, but in all fairness, people here have some stereotypes for people in California. And so I think that both of them are just very strong states, are very strong for having the stereotypes. So yes, I do think that people do look at Texans or think of Texans in a certain way, and maybe not in the most positive light.
Yeah. As a Republican, you said that you have some issues which make you a Republican, which abortion being one, and then there are other controversial issues. So let's dissect them a little bit. Let's go into them and see how I want to understand your point of view, because as you said that people are not ready to hear other people. So let's discuss that. So let's begin with abortion. It has been a controversial topic for decades. No other country has such abortion as a primary concern when it comes to elections, but US. First of all, why do you think that is? Why is this such a big issue?
In America or just?
In America, why is it such a big issue? If you go to a different country, maybe Australia or England or India for that matter, you don't see this issue taking a lead when elections. But whenever an election comes, we see that, Roe v. Wade, abortion are the first ones to be, discussed.
Yeah, I guess I'm even more curious to know, how is it, there are things that are legal in our society, but there still are some moral issues or some religious issues around certain things, which then sort of cast a shadow around something. So, as far as the US, I don't know that I can fully answer that question. I do think that, a lot of this came out of the feminist movement. And I think women feeling that by being able to have an abortion was sort of their right as a woman and their freedom versus feeling oppressed. And I think that, I think what's interesting is just overall, I would like to comment about our society. Certain words are given certain definitions, and they have been that way for, since the test of time. And then what I see with our culture more recently is we start to change the meaning of definitions or change the words that we're using for definitions, which then starts to normalize certain things which otherwise would have been taboo, or there would be some moral pressure against certain things. So abortion, for instance, it has two different, people could see that as a medical term, or they could see that as not, but in some ways it feels a little bit more neutral. Well, more recently with the reversal of Roe v. Wade, the issue has not been necessarily, the buzzword is not necessarily abortion, it's healthcare, and restricting women's right to healthcare. And so that feels very different than the word abortion, feels very different than the word of termination of a life. You know what I'm saying? And so I think I'm like veering a little off from what you're saying, but I've just noticed, the other thing that I'm hearing a lot lately in our society is my truth. My truth is very interesting because truth is pretty black and white. But my truth would really be subjective to what I would feel or say it to be, which actually would really be my perception, right? Not necessarily my truth. So I think, again, I'm sorry I'm getting so off topic here, but as far as abortion, I think that there is sort of, there's a huge division between, one is what do we accept as life, and which life is important and which life is not, and which one is valued in a certain way and which one is not. And so why it's such a hot button issue, I think, America is the land of the free. And I think that we're a very independent nation. People want to have their freedoms. And in some way, as a Republican, that resonates with me. I mean, I like to have my freedoms. I love that we're in a country that's protected by a constitution, which also feels like in more recent years has come into question. So as far as abortion, like I can see on the other side where you feel like, okay, this is my body, this should be my choice. I live in a free country, these are my freedoms. So I sort of get that. The only problem with that argument is it involves another human life. And so if you agree that life begins at conception, then you have to sort of deal with, come to reconcile that you're also involving another life in that decision.
Do you agree with that? That except for some exceptions, it should be legal?
Yeah, the only exception that I would say that I personally and morally grapple with is in the case of a mother's life, which is actually fairly rare percentage-wise of the amount of pregnancies. As far as rape and incest, I mean, that's a terrible thing to happen. And I definitely have a lot of compassion for any woman that's going through that. However, at the same time, I don't see the justification for ending a life due to those unfortunate, awful, terrible circumstances.
Mhm. Okay, makes
So,
sense.
well, and one thing I wanted to say, like as a society where we are really where things are lacking as a society on abortion is we have got to provide these mothers other options, and we have
Right,
to make them yes, much more like childcare in the United States is extremely expensive, probably more than any other country.
right.
And our government is not really providing great support and assistance for a single mothers or women that find themselves in this situation. There
Mhm.
is a huge lack of support. And really, you find that support a lot of times through a church or religious organization. But I would say our society in general has moved away from being as a church society, if you will. So we are lacking hugely in support for women. So again, I want to come at it from a place of compassion and understanding and not judgment. So I think we
So do
really
you
have to
think that
step
if
up as a society.
said childcare, right, and
Yes. Yeah.
healthcare, if
Yes.
government provides healthcare,
Yes.
childcare to
Uh-huh.
single mother or
Yes.
women who have been abused and raped, so
Uh-huh.
do you think
Yes.
that will probably
Reduce.
reduce the ask for
Yes,
legalizing
yes.
abortion?
I hear what you're saying. I would think so. I think if bringing a child into the world, you had more of a network of support. I think if you look at the women who are getting these procedures, they're probably the majority unmarried women.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in time in a distress. Like I have to argue that as a mother, um, there is something very unnatural of aborting your own child once you find out that you're pregnant, especially women, and they've shown this in these crisis pregnancy centers. The rate of abortion drops significantly if they do an ultrasound. And
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of the crisis pregnancy that are either faith-based, pro-life, they really want to provide that to the mother so they can really get a full understanding. They still, up until this point, legally could still get an abortion, but at least they knew that they were making a fully informed decision. And I think that that is important for all of us to make such a major decision. Is to know really what we're doing. So to hear the heartbeat, to see that ultrasound, once that happens, the abortion rate goes down significantly.
Mm-hmm.
Once, if we had more support, I think you see I think the percentages would show that few, happily married women and, are going out and seeking abortions. I think these are very crisis situations. I think they could be rape. I think they could be incest. They could be underage young girls. This could be sexual abuse. This could be single women who are pursuing a career. Whatever it is, these women, these people in our society need support. And I think instead of looking at them as sort of villains, I
Mm-hmm.
think we need to really look at them with compassion and provide other options and just support. And yes, I do think it would go down. Yes.
All right, makes sense. Let's move on to the next topic.
Mhm.
Let's move on to immigration. Immigration is a hot debate in US.
Mhm.
Illegal immigration has been rising in the states
Mhm.
for years, for decades.
Mhm.
Administrations have come and gone. They've tried different things, but no one has been able to revolutionize the system. There's no proper
Mhm.
plan. There are certain legal ways, which even I used to come to US,
Mhm.
but then there are illegal ways, and then that's affecting the economy, the healthcare. It's putting pressure on the resources. Uh,
Mhm.
so Republicans seem to be very, strict towards immigration. They want immediate results. They want to totally ban illegal immigration, but Democrats
Mhm.
are seen to have. They appear to be like more soft towards illegal immigration. They
Mhm.
want to have sanctuary cities. They want to invite,
Mhm.
immigrants from south border.
Mhm.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds lovely in theory to be able to offer, the sanctuary city and invite people in who especially are escaping, whether it's persecution, it's not being able to provide for their families to improve their quality of life. I mean, again, I think if you're a compassionate person, there's a side of you that can empathize of why people would want to come to our great country. However, you did hit on the point of, resources. I think doing this in a legal manner, because illegally, the Texas borders are flooded
Hmm.
with illegal immigration. And I think, these sanctuary cities, I think Governor Abbott has gotten a really bad rap for sending busloads of illegal immigrants to sanctuary cities. And
And
I
next
thought
to
the plan
Kamala
was
Harris is,
brilliant.
I think, next to Vice President's house, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think there was so much uproar about this. When I heard it, I thought this was a great idea because, again, these are about making informed decisions. So if
Right.
you really can see and understand what is happening at the border, or you are just seeing such a small percentage of people being bussed into your city, and already New York cannot house any more illegals, and they're having to send them, to other places. And I think I saw recently in the news that they're no longer considered a sanctuary city. And so, you can't expect the burden to just fall on a couple of border states and just say that, we're just going to allow this. I mean, there needs to be a legal process.
Hmm.
I think, there are terrorists coming through. We've had, issues as far as coronavirus and whatever other healthcare. There are a huge trafficking problem with children being trafficked over, people being trafficked over. I mean, it's terrible. And the truckload of 50 people or so that died in Texas over, being trafficked over the border. So I really do think that it is an issue that the United States, everybody needs to sort of like wake up and make an informed decision on. So I think it would be easy to just sit back if it doesn't affect you and just say, well, why not? We're all, essentially we all immigrated. My father's father, so my grandfather and grandmother came to the United States as immigrants. I mean, and I think that Republicans are very open. A lot of Republicans are very open to people coming in legally and to finding ways to let more people in legally.
Hmm.
And making it easier in some sense. But I do think that any country must protect its borders.
Right. Makes sense. So, Julie, let's talk about another controversial topic, that is gun control. Uh, Democrats are usually seen as people who want to have more gun control. They want to have restrictive access. And Republicans are generally seen as people who do not want to have any ban on owning guns, no restrictions. Is that, first of all, is that true?
I mean, yes, I'm sure that people sort of land along a spectrum, whether they're Republican or Democrat, but I would say overall, yes, that is fairly correct.
Mhm.
Yeah.
US has had 410 mass shootings till today, in this very year. I checked the stats in the morning, it was 410. Do you think that if there was more gun control, they would have reduced?
Not necessarily. I think it goes deeper. It's more of a cultural, societal problem in general. I think that people that are going to be doing illegal activities are going to find ways to illegally obtain weapons.
Mhm.
I think that there's a huge mental health crisis and problem that we have not addressed culturally. I think, again, when you look back at providing levels of support, with our healthcare, even if you have healthcare, mental health is not always covered, or if you do, it's a very small percentage. I think it really goes so deep, and we don't have tons of time to talk about it. But I think just looking back to, starting out with the way that we raise our children, are we able for parents to be present and involved in their children's lives, or are we as a society putting so much value on work and productivity and independence that we are not able to be as in touch as we need to be? Some of these school shootings that you look at, I feel like most of what you hear, it was a sort of disturbed child, or a child that had problems over a period of time. And it may not have just been one thing that somebody said, that's a little odd. This was something that was kind of going on for years. So just to back up, as far as gun control, one, it is a constitutional right for us to bear arms, and I don't think that that was done without intention. I think that there are reasons that we should be able to have that right. And again, I think when you look at trying to place all of these laws over guns, I think you probably more so take the guns out of the law-abiding citizens, because they're the ones that are following your bans and your laws. And the people that are going to commit these crimes, you know, are going to be able to find the means. Also, let's look back several years ago, and please forgive me, I'm not going to cite this correctly, but I remember in Cannes, France, Cannes, they had someone during a festival or down one of their boulevards just like plowed a truck down and killed, ran over however many people. There are ways to mass kill people that is not done with guns. A bomber, people make homemade bombs. The problem there is not the bomb, it is the mental health issue of the person. And so until we figure out how to provide more support as a society for these people, then I just think that taking away the guns is just a band-aid, or it's going to create other ways that people are going to choose violence.
Mm-hmm.
So
that makes sense. But I just have one follow-up question on that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's concerning that a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old is able to get a gun, buy a gun from Walmart, and just barge into a school and start shooting?
There are, especially in the state of Texas, or I also lived and went to college in Northeast Louisiana, very much a hunting, sporting kind of state. So you do find younger people that use rifles and things for sport, and are actually trained from a very young age how to safely use a gun.
But then what about AK-47? I understand hunting guns, but then having access to AK-47, even if you're 20, 21-year-old, that's something that I personally didn't understand. I understand the right to bear arms for your own protection, 100%. I totally agree with that. But then why do you need an AK-47 for that?
I mean, that's a good question. I don't necessarily, I don't think that we, I don't disagree that we can't provide some sort of laws around what kind of guns or age restrictions or that sort of thing. I mean, I think a lot of Republicans would agree that there could be, some laws in place that made sense, but to just completely go out and ban guns, I just don't think that's going to solve the problem. Mm-hmm. And it also takes away any protection. The interesting thing is there have been shootings in Texas. I think there was one at a church in Fort Worth a few years ago where someone did come in to shoot, but then one of the congregants, because you can conceal and carry legally in Texas, was able to shoot the person. And so, which prevented more people from being killed. So, I don't have all the answers. Mm-hmm. But I do believe that there is a reason that it is in our Constitution as a right. Mm-hmm. I don't think that just taking that right away is going to solve the problem. But I do think that there are some safeguards that we can put in place that we hopefully can all agree upon or come to some sort of consensus that our lawmakers, can do. So, yeah.
Forward. Just to add, you mentioned that economy is one of the major things that aligns you as a Republican. How would you rate Bidenomics? That's the term that is being used right now as a economic policies under Biden administration. Do you think economy is doing good for the past 2.5 years?
I do not think that's the general consensus around here.
I mean, I understand interest rates are off the charts, yes. Right? Wages have not risen. Inflation has risen so much. People are having jobs, but no one's talking about the quality of jobs. They have to do multiple jobs to, just to stay afloat. This is not the economy that, US should have. US is a superpower. US is one of the richest countries in the world, but still people are struggling. But do you think that if there's a change in administration, this situation will change?
I'm hopeful that it will. I mean,
Mhm.
I think whether you agree with Trump or not, I think when he was in office, he did have a track record of economic growth, job growth. I'm not an economist. I can't speak eloquently about it. Anything that I would share with you is just how it feels as um, the suburban housewife I am, which I almost want to roll my eyes when I say it because I think that does not give you a lot of credibility. However, I'm the one that is, paying a lot of the bills or, I am a stay-at-home mother, but my husband works and I am doing the majority of the shopping for our home. And so, yes, when gasoline prices are up and, which affects everything, everything has to be transported somewhere. So, when cost of goods are up across the board, it definitely, does affect all of us. As far as the jobs, that's very interesting because there are, there are, with COVID, I think a lot of people were able to not return to work and we had unemployment available for extended periods of time, or other things that made it possible for people not to have to work. And so that's very interesting, another topic. So as far as the economy, I think we could do better. I think we have done better.
Interesting.
I'm hopeful with a change of administration that things will change. I think it's concerning the debt of this country. I think the student loan forgiveness is a problem. There are a lot of us who worked really hard to pay for our college or had to take out loans and then had to pay them back. I think that there is something very logical about you spend money and then you have to, or you borrow money and you have to pay it back. And I think to think otherwise or to feel that we're entitled otherwise, is interesting.
That is the cancel culture. Anyone who says anything or anyone who expresses their views and then you are not, you don't agree with them, you just cancel them. You boycott them. Actors have, suffered because of that. Comedians have suffered because of that. People have lost their livelihood. If you say something and if someone grabs a camera, records you lose your job. This kind of thing, this cancel culture, what are your views on that?
I mean, it's just unfortunate. Again, it goes back to we need to be able to have, like, to get anything done in this country, to move forward in a positive way, to sort of like reunite this country. I think we all have to be, Republicans and Democrats have to be willing to have respectful dialogues. I think that there are valid points in both parties. I think anytime you go too far left or too far right, it's too far. We need to sort of like find the common ground or be able to discuss and have a healthy debate about how to solve these issues, because I think we all come from different backgrounds and different experiences and have different ideas and different solutions. And so I think that until we're willing to sort of hear each other out and work together, we're going to be stuck in what we're currently dealing with. And so, like, even just you and I talking through and you bringing up some different points, it's definitely given me some food for thought. The gun control, I don't have strong feelings about it. I do feel like it is our constitutional right to have guns, but at the same time, do I think that there could be more laws surrounding guns and protection and in legislation? Absolutely. And I think the more we talked about it, we probably could come up. I mean, you and I could come up with a great solution. We would just have it all solved. No, but seriously, I just think that it's the division right now, and back to cancel culture. Because someone feels differently, that they're, a racist, they're a bigot, they're, it's unfortunate. That's not how we create solutions.
So, Julie, with the upcoming elections, let's talk about the candidates that are, running to be the Republican nominee. There's President Trump, there's Ron DeSantis, there's Mike Pence, Chris Christie, Nikki Haley. I think these were the main candidates that everyone was talking about. Like, Do you have any favorite among those?
Well, I would say you could pick them all apart and pick your favorite pieces out and form this great candidate. I think that, oh man, President Trump, people love him or they hate him. I actually feel like I'm somewhere in between. I think that he is very successful of getting things done, and I think in some ways we need somebody that is fearless and is willing um, to
Uproot the system probably and
yes, yes,
find new
yeah,
means. Okay.
yes. And then at the same time, there needs to be a level of diplomacy in order to really work with people of other viewpoints. And I think that in some ways, Trump can unite people. And in some ways, I think internationally, I think Trump has done really well. But I think within our own country, he's definitely been more divisive. So as far as getting things done, I just think, I do say, I think he does have a track record, whether you like him or not. As far as Ron DeSantis, I think he has some wonderful things to say. I like from what I've seen of how he's run Florida. I think he, in some ways, has gotten a bad rap about some of the bills and some of the things that he's set out in order to protect children or protect people's rights and freedoms. Has been twisted into that he, like the Don't Say Gay bill, or that he's some sort of bigot or what have you, which I don't think is very fair. And then the other candidates, I honestly haven't been following as much. I don't know that they're like the most viable candidate. So,
Right. You said that, for President Trump or Ron DeSantis, they've said something, but their words were twisted, their policy were twisted and showcased in a way that, was not true. This thing of if you don't agree with someone, you just weaponize it and then use it against it and then cancel them and say things about them. This is increasing day by day, from both the sides. I'm not saying that it's only being done from one side or the other. Like, this is not only affecting, the ability to have a decent debate, but it's also degrading the level of politics within the country. So what do you want to say about that? Like, I understand that the only solution is to come together, talk it out. But then if people are not ready, like, this division is growing day by day. Like, where do you think this is headed?
I mean, I think like when we look at US politics, a lot of times when there is a president that falls out of favor, or the economy or some issue is not going well, predominantly I think the economy, or there's a war, what have you, then it switches to the other party. And then whether that person gets reelected, they have one more term, and then it switches back to the other party. So I think we're just going to keep like flip-flopping back and forth, from party to party until we get tired of this person's policy and then, try something new. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't think, the current president, his popularity is pretty low. I think that people do have some real concerns about the economy and other issues. And so I do think that there is a really good chance that we could get a Republican candidate. Now, even as a Republican, do I think that that is the solution? No, not necessarily. Again, it's really gonna boil down to us finding, being the bipartisan, truly being bipartisan, and finding solutions that, we're not twisting we're not manipulating or controlling to try to get our way. We're really trying to find out, like, what is the best way.
So, there are 40 criminal charges being filed against President Trump. What do you want to say about that? Do you think that's an agenda that Democrats are, carrying out to, decrease his popularity or, stop him from rerunning?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it does feel like more recently that and I don't even know how to even articulate this correctly. So somehow there needs to be more of a separation between our judicial department and the politics, because I think that some of the politics this is infiltrated, and I really question um, whether there really is just reasons for these indictments. I don't know. It's really hard to decipher when the media is strongly saying one thing, but if you look at the media, so many things we find out later were untrue, or conjecture. And so, I don't really trust that what's being said is necessarily correct. Do I think Trump is a criminal? I don't know. I don't feel that he necessarily is, but I also, he's a human being just like all of us. And I know that he's made some bad decisions, or, did some things that, could be, I don't know whether they were illegal or weren't legal. I'm not sure.
Okay, interesting. Julie, my last question to you is,
Yeah.
what are your expectations from, future administration, be it a Republican, be it a Democratic government, in 2024? What do you want your government to do for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I want the government to protect our borders, and look at immigration policy as a whole. I do think, we should let people in legally. I think I will just say, as sort of a little side note, my sister-in-law, so my husband is a New Zealand citizen, and he and his two siblings were adopted from a family who, his father is an American, his mother is a Kiwi, a New Zealander, and they were born and raised in New Zealand. Well, so during the pandemic, his sister, who then has married an Australian, has a family, lives in Australia, she wanted to come and spend some time in the United States. And because she was adopted and she was not like a blood child of his father, who's an American, she was unable to be able to be here for any considerable amount of time. She just did not have the same rights and privileges. So I find that situation really unfortunate, that her going through the legal process was not able to be able to come freely into the United States, as should and have been her birthright by having an American father. And so anyway, I think we really do need to look at immigration, but I do think we need to secure our borders. Whatever side of the fence you fall on, I definitely think that we can provide asylum in certain situations. And for the most part, I think we need to focus on providing legal means. And I do think that we need to figure out real solutions to secure our border. It's not going to be 100% secure, but I don't know. The wall seems like in some regards it worked. Right now, Governor Abbott has put these massive buoys out in the river, and it has prevented people from coming over. And some people think that is terrible. But, if you don't want people coming into your house, what do you have to do? You have to close your door. You have to lock your fence. So, let's just be practical here. So I think that is something we need to look at. I think of the economy. I think at the national debt. I think at foreign relations. What's happening with Ukraine, with Russia, with China, all of those things are issues that I want. I do think abortion is very important. I mean, I will probably stand alone in a lot of rooms on this one, but I do feel like we really need to go back to conception. Life starts at conception. And then from conception, how are we supporting our mothers? How are we supporting our children? Our children are going to be our leaders one day. You and I are going to be sitting in a nursing home, and my children and their children are going to be in charge of public policy. So I do think it is important how we raise them and how we treat them and how we treat each other. And I think that there's a huge component to America that I think is very different from other countries. I think we pride ourselves on being this independent nation, and we can sort of do anything, and we love and want our freedom, and all of that is good, fine, and great, but it really takes a village. And I think that's where America has sort of missed the mark. You know, I think when we value success and material and worldly things so much that we neglect the community that we are a part of and mistreat and disrespect our neighbors, and we don't provide adequate care for our children and our mothers and our elderly, you know, that is the real fundamental problem to me.
Mhm.
So who is willing to take that on? Homelessness, crime, like those are huge problems. Those are especially in like these large metropolitan cities. But where does that boil back to? Why are people on the streets? Why are people addicted to drugs? Why are people homeless? Why are people wanting to kill their babies?
Mhm.
What is missing? Like, what is the commonality? What is the common thread? So I think that is sort of like a soul search for all of us. And how is a presidential candidate going to be able to solve that? I don't know that they are. I think it's society all having to just like pull up our bootstraps and say, you know what, we are committed to you know, having a better world and creating a better culture and caring about the other person that we don't like and we don't
Mhm.
agree with.
Yes.
So
No, makes sense. You know, those are very, very valid points. Those are very valid points, and it's amazing that, you know, you have such clarity in your thoughts, Julie. Thank you so much for
thank
agreeing to
you.
come and answering all these questions. I know some of them were super controversial, but thank you so much for answering them so very well. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for having me.